Welcome in the Vikings Now. I am your host, Patrick Seatman. Coming up on today's show, I have my final Vikings 53-man roster projection before cuts are due tomorrow, Tuesday, August 23rd at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we hop into my 53-man roster projection, T.Y. McGill Jr., he was cut about 10 minutes before I started recording this video, and it's pretty unfortunate because he really had a strong preseason for the Vikings. He had 3.5 sacks, and I originally had him making the team and making the 53-man roster. Obviously, we had to make some changes following his recent cut tweeted out by Adam Schefter, but unfortunate for him, he had a great preseason. Shout out to T.Y. McGill, the journeyman throughout the NFL. But now let's start with the quarterback position. This may come as a little bit of a shocker to some people. I am only going to keep 2 quarterbacks on the Vikings roster. I frankly just don't think Sean Mannion, Kellen Mond have proven enough to this new Kevin O'Connell offense and this new Kwesi Adofo-Mensah management that they are worth keeping an extra quarterback on the roster. I think Nick Mullens has the most experience being a backup in the NFL and stepping in and having to play big-time games when the starter goes down. I would personally stick with Nick Mullens and Kirk Cousins, have those 2 be your quarterbacks because there are a lot of other position groups on this Vikings roster that need that extra player in that group. Now let's shift to the running backs. I think the running backs was one of the hardest to kind of decipher on who is going to make the team. Obviously, Dalvin Cook, lock. But besides that, even Alexander Mattison, I think he was on the bubble. I do think, however, the Vikings are going to be going overload on the running back and fullback position. I think they're going to keep 5. I think they're keeping all 5 of the big names. Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison, Kene Nwangwu, Ty Chandler, and C.J Ham. Rick Spielman actually came out this week saying that the Vikings should consider trading Alexander Mattison to the Philadelphia Eagles, which could be interesting. But I think just Ty Chandler's shown so much during the preseason, his elusive cutting, just the way he is. He's just a very complete running back for a 6th-rounder out of North Carolina. And I know C.J Ham, he was up for question of whether he'll make the team. The Vikings used fullbacks on 39% of snaps last season. Only used him on about 8% of snaps so far in the preseason. I do think he'll make the team, however. He's a fan favorite. I think he could play the wing T position as well as tight end if asked. Now, the wide receiver group. Another very challenging group to kind of nail down. Obviously, B.C. Johnson yesterday tore his ACL, and he won't be making this team anymore, so I had to adjust that group as well. I think the big 4 that you see on your screen right now, Jefferson, Thielen, K.J. Osborn, and Ihmir Smith-Marsette, I think they are locks. I don't think anything will change out of those 4, but I do think with this wide receiver group, it comes down to the last 2 spots, the 5 and 6 spots, and I think it will go to Myron Mitchell and Triston Jackson. Myron Mitchell, he's had a great camp for the Minnesota Vikings. He's shown that he can be that possession receiver that old B.C. Johnson is. And then Triston Jackson, the undrafted guy out of Syracuse from the 2020 NFL Draft. He was with the Rams practice squad last year, so he has experience in this Kevin O'Connell offense. I chose him over Dan Chisena. In the video I made from at home yesterday, I mentioned that Dan Chisena may be a sleeper to make this team. I just think they'll go with Triston Jackson. He's a big physical wide receiver, and I think he's shown a lot throughout the preseason. He had that one brutal drop against the Broncos, but besides that, he's been really solid. He knows the offense. So I have Myron Mitchell and Triston Jackson rounding out my 6 wide receivers for the Vikings. Now let's get into the tight ends, the hybrids, the wide receivers, hybrids with the old offensive linemen. I love this position group for the Vikings because it's extremely underrated. I do think Irv Smith and Johnny Mundt, those 2 are locks to make the team. I would be extremely shocked if one of those 2 would get cut. I would really doubt it. I think it comes down to Zach Davidson, Ben Ellefson, and Nick Muse. I'm going Zach Davidson. I think Zach Davidson, he has more of an untapped potential than guys like Nick Muse and Ben Ellefson. I think with Zach Davidson, his 6'7" frame, 250 pounds, he has really good wiggle. He's not the best run blocker, but I think he could be used as a Kyle Rudolph red zone threat like Rudy was for the Vikings. But now this is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. Get down below. I want to take the pulse of the Vikings fan base going into this season. Who is your favorite Vikings player on the roster? Not past, not future players. Who is your favorite player on the roster currently? My answer to this, and it has been for the past couple of years, is Harrison Smith. I love Harrison Smith, the way he brings the boom from the safety position. He's just been such a consistent player for the Vikings. He rarely gets injured. He plays almost 16, 17 games every single year. Mine's Harrison Smith. Let me know, get down in the comments down below and let me know who your favorite Vikings player is going in the next season. Now let's talk about the big boys, the men in the trenches, the Minnesota Vikings moving company. The Vikings O-line depth chart looks like this right now. Ezra Cleveland, Christian Darrisaw, Garrett Bradbury, Jesse Davis, and O'Neal, those are slotted to be the starters. But I do think Ed Ingram at the right guard position will step in, and I think he will get solid first-team reps. Now, I have 10 Vikings offensive linemen making this roster. Like I said, Darrisaw, Cleveland, Bradbury, Jesse Davis, O'Neal, and Ed Ingram I think are the locks. But then I think the backup left tackle, they'll go with Blake Brandel. I think he's shown him enough throughout the preseason. Chris Reed, I think, has to make the roster just because he can play center position if Bradbury were have to go down. He obviously can play the left guard position if something were to happen to Ezra. Then Austin Schlottmann, he's looked fantastic throughout preseason. He had the highest rated game, I think, in week 2 against the Niners out of any offensive lineman. Then Oli Udoh, I think, will be the backup right tackle just because he has been in the system for a pretty long time, and he's familiar with playing the right tackle position for the Vikings. Now, if you're excited to see the Minnesota moving company move people around week 1 and move Kenny Clark and the Green Bay Packers around, subscribe to the channel. If we could pick up 25 to 30 new subs on this video, and I can go in and check after the video comes out, I can check the analytics and seeing how many new subs we got. Go support the big boys. Go support the guys in the trenches because they don't get enough love as it is. Go down, subscribe to the channel, hit that big red button. I would love to see the support. If we gain 30 subs off this video, showing the support for the Minnesota Vikings moving company because they're going to be moving dudes around all year. Now let's talk about the other side of the football in the trenches. The interior defensive line, Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips, Armon Watts, James Lynch, T.Y. McGill, who unfortunately was just cut. And I think the Vikings, this is going to be a position group where they do take 6 guys from that interior position. I think it's going to go Harrison Phillips, like I said. Tomlinson will make it. Armon Watts, I think he has a potential sneaky breakout year. And then James Lynch. I think James Lynch, with the way he's been playing throughout preseason, I think he could be fantastic for the Vikings upcoming this season. He had 12.5 sacks his senior year at Baylor, and now this is the year 2 for James Lynch. Potential breakout year. I have T.J. Smith now making the roster, and then obviously Jaylen Twyman. Everything he has had to overcome this past year, I think the Vikings will reward him, and he'll make the roster. But first, I want to give a shout-out to the proud sponsor of today's show, Fanatics. Week 1 against the Packers, U.S. Bank Stadium is going to be rocking. You're going to want to make sure you got your Vikings gear and your Vikings merch, and you're going to be wanting to be sporting the purple loud and proud. We got a great deal going on at chatsports.com/Vikings combo. You can get this 2 t-shirt pack to the right of me, actually, in purple and gray. You can just have some sort of purple on in U.S. Bank Stadium, cheering loud and proud for the Vikings against the Green Bay Packers. U.S. Bank Stadium, it's going to be a hectic place week 1, and I can't wait to see the Vikings fans wearing their purple, screaming loud and proud. So go check it out, chatsports.com/Vikings combo. Now, the linebackers. I think this is also another interesting group because there's a ton of – it's a deep linebacking core that I think the Vikings have, and I think you have Jordan Hicks, the wide side linebacker, and Eric Kendricks, the middle linebacker. They'll be locks. But then Troy Dye and Brian Asamoah, I think they'll be the backups, the linebackers 2 on the depth chart behind Hicks and Kendricks. Then Chaz Surratt and Blake Lynch. I understand Chaz Surratt was kind of a bubble candidate for this team, and I do think he will end up making this roster. And Blake Lynch, the wide side linebacker, I think he will also make this team. But I do want to shift to the secondary now because I think this has some debate whether how many corners the Vikings will bring. Right now I have the Vikings bringing 5 corners. I think those corners would be Pat Pete, Cameron Dantzler, Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans, and Shandon Sullivan. With the 3 safeties they're bringing, kind of a shocker, I don't have them bringing Josh Metellus. I think it will be Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, Lewis Cine, and then obviously Josh Metellus being the guy who gets cut. I think this cornerback group is going to be a ton of fun to watch this season. I think with the young guys, Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth Jr., I think they could really step up and be really solid corners 3 and 4 on this roster. And obviously, I'm super excited to see Cameron Dantzler. If he can finally live up to his potential as that second-round draft pick from last year's draft. But now let's finish it off, the special teams. The guys that make it all come together. The long snapper, that's a lock, and Andrew DePaula. And then Ryan Wright, our fan favorite punter already after his great preseason game against the Broncos. He's a lock in to make it the punter position. Obviously, they just cut Jordan Berry. Only punter we have is Ryan Wright. He seems pretty confident that he will be the only punter for the rest of the season. And then Greg Joseph, the kicker for the Vikings. He had a 58-yarder against the Broncos. He's locked in. I'm super excited to see just that I have some confidence in this kicking group, or this kicker position for the first time in a while. Besides Blair Walsh and then obviously Dan Bailey, it was always very up and down. But I want to ask you guys this. Who did I leave off my 53-man roster projection? Obviously, there's a ton of names to think about. Guys I'm leaving off. Who do you guys think I left off? Get down in the comments below. Also, follow me on Twitter, Pat Seatman NFL. I'll be tweeting about the Vikings all year long. Thank you guys for watching. Skol Vikes.